Hello, welcome back. My name is Scott Douglas, and I am an associate professor in the University of British Columbia's Okanagan School of Education. This is part 5 of 6 videos exploring principles for EAP materials development and design. So, today we're asking ourselves, what are some key principles for English for academic purposes materials development? So, we're thinking about what do we need to inject into materials when we're preparing students for higher education? Today, what we're going to be looking at are the ideas of content-based instruction, task-based language teaching, and inquiry-based learning. So as I've mentioned in the other videos, if you've watched them, that I think it's a good idea to have principles as we set out to create and design materials, but also even as we're looking at choosing and adapting materials for our own use. And these principles, very often, I think we all have certain things that we're looking for, or certain things that drive us as we're creating materials. And the goal of these videos is to make maybe the implicit explicit so that we have it right out there in the open. And so I've been tweeting about this. There's 27 tweets that you can find at hashtag EAP materials writing. This series of 6 videos is looking at 18 of those principles. And right now we're going to look at 3. So the first one that we're looking at is this idea of content-based instruction. So this is the idea that when we're teaching English for academic purposes, we're not just teaching language, but we're also teaching content or disciplinary knowledge. It's the idea that language isn't an empty vessel, but rather language is a medium for gaining knowledge. And so this content that we're looking at, so whether it's from engineering or social sciences or the humanities, it provides the context for additional language learning. And it also has that added benefit of expanding students' general knowledge about a subject. The more students know about a subject in general, the better prepared they'll be for when they encounter that subject in their later studies. And so what we have here is we have content acting as a vehicle to get at language learning made up of grammar, vocabulary, strategies, core concepts, and all those different kinds of things. So, for example, here's a 2-page spread from a unit on Canadian regional geography. So the content is the geography of Canada. And so, but there's also language goals that are embedded in this content learning. So this activity, what we have here, students are thinking about how to organize supporting ideas in a compare-contrast essay, and they're thinking about compare-contrast essay structure, and they're looking at the language of compare and contrast. But they are also learning about Canada and Canada's geography. They're learning about British Columbia, and they're learning about the prairie provinces, and they're getting all kinds of facts about the weather and climate in British Columbia compared to the prairies, and they're learning how the landscape was created in these different geographic regions. So you can see they're going to leave this class knowing more about Canada than they knew when they started the class. But hopefully they'll also know more about comparing and contrasting ideas than when they started the class. So it's that 2-for-1 gain. The next thing that we're going to talk about is this task-based language teaching, or also TBLT. And so task-based language teaching, it's the idea that students are focusing on tasks, and these are tasks where they need to use the language in order to achieve the task. So it moves away from where we're teaching students language so they can eventually do something, and we're actually switching it so that they're using language in order to learn it. And so now, as they're trying to focus on communication and have this real need to do something, they're pulling on their language resources to achieve these goals. So for example, here we have a task where students are designing a poster. And so this poster, they're designing this poster so that they can compare and contrast 2 geographic regions in Canada and then do a 5-minute presentation along that. And so as they're creating this poster, they're using language and they're drawing on their language resources to create the poster. Ostensibly, the task is to create the poster, and they're going to have this product at the end of it, but they're also going to be using and practicing and learning language as they're doing that. And so it's having these real tasks that sort of mirror what they'll do out there in the academy, that we're also doing them in the EAP classroom. And then the last one that we're going to talk about for this video is inquiry-based learning. So this is where, instead of presenting students with knowledge, we're helping students pose questions in order to create knowledge themselves. And so now we're helping students come up with meaningful questions about a topic, and then they're going to develop a plan to answer those questions. They're going to look at sources of information and whether or not they would help them answer those questions. They'll be continually revisiting and honing their questions, coming up with an answer, and creating a product of inquiry. So that might be like a poster, presentation, or an essay, and then they're going to be reflecting on this process. What we're doing is that the students are coming up with, they're deciding themselves what they want to learn about a topic, and they're coming up with these questions, and this is now, these questions will prime them for later encounters with language and later encounters with knowledge and with content. And so they come up with a question, and now they're actively seeking the answers, and they need language in order to find those answers. So for example, here we have a little section that's on fostering inquiry and helping students come up with questions that makes comparisons. So for example, students, this is a unit of inquiry on Canadian regional geography. Students might wonder, what are some of the regional geographical differences between where they are right now and another part of Canada? So I'm here in British Columbia. Students might wonder, okay, so this is what British Columbia looks like. How is this different than the prairies? And then now they're ready to go out and find that knowledge, rather than us just presenting them with the answers. And of course, as they're looking for these answers, we're going to help them with the language in order to create the products of inquiry or write that essay that answers their own question. And so this can be a very powerful, motivating way of learning language when students are engaged in active inquiry. So there you go. Today's 3 ideas were content-based instruction, task-based language teaching, and inquiry-based learning. And these are 3 things that I keep uppermost in mind as I'm creating EAP materials and I'm preparing students for post-secondary studies. So thank you very much. Once again, here are some references for what I've been talking about, and I'm glad that you took this time to watch this video. Take care.